Hello everyone. Today we are going to continue the American literature class, and we are going to talk about the Romantic period. Last time we've talked about Romantic period, but today we are going to focus on fiction. Last time we focused on the Romantic period in general, and we've mentioned the influence of the Romantic writers, the Romantic poets, Coleridge, Wordsworth, and how it hailed to America from Europe. Today we are going to continue talking about the Romantic period, but with focus on fiction writing. We will talk about the first literary generation, the Romance, and we are going to introduce Nathaniel Hawthorne. He is a great Romantic writer. Herman Melville, Edgar Allan Poe, Frederick Douglass. Nathaniel Hawthorne, Herman Melville, Edgar Allan Poe, Emily Dickinson, and the Transcendentalists represent the first great literary generation produced in the United States. Remember when we talked about William Bradford and Bradstreet, all these were somehow connected or dependent on the literature written in the home country, but these writers started to take their own paths, okay? Producing a new way of looking at life, a new way of writing literature and describing reality. In the case of the novelists, the Romantic vision tended to express itself in the form of Hawthorne called the Romance. The Romance, which is a heightened emotional and symbolic form of the novel. Romances were not love stories. Please pay attention to this. Romances were not love stories, although love can be embedded in these romances, okay? But serious novels that use special techniques to communicate complex and subtle meanings. And you can talk about Nathaniel Hawthorne's The Scarlet Letter, for example, which treats a serious topic in the society, which is suppression, feminism, women oppression, okay? Dogmas. It's about Puritanism and how it encroached upon the lives of the people who lived on the soil of America, okay? The serious American novelist had to invent new forms as well, hence the sprawling, idiosyncratic shape of Melville's novel Moby Dick. Idiosyncratic means strange. The book that is entitled Moby Dick is a novel, okay? It is a huge book. And people, when they criticize it or when they write about it, they believe that Melville wrote nearly about everything. It's a book about whales in the first place. It's a book about sailing on the seas, hunting a whale, okay? And it is named after the whale's name, Moby Dick. But again, people find anatomy, for example, in Melville's book. It's a huge book, big book. Edward Said says that it is the greatest American novel. Why? Because it contains philosophy too, it contains literature, it contains contemplations, and it is based on a huge experience of the writer himself. And Edgar Allan Poe's dreamlike, wandering narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym, for example. Okay? Poe, will come to Poe, Edgar Allan Poe. So, writers such as Nathaniel Hawthorne, Herman Melville, Edgar Allan Poe gave the American literature its nature. Now the Romance, sorry for the interruption. Now the Romance form is dark and forbidding, indicating how difficult it is to create an identity without a stable society. Always remember that the ancestors of today's Americans were leading a turbulent life that was searching for an identity. Their questions about their origins, their questions about their relationship to their mother countries, whether they are coming from Germany, whether they are coming from Spain or from England, okay, which eventually controlled the whole place. Nathaniel Hawthorne is one of these writers who were searching for an identity, and he is a fifth-generation American of English descent. Look, English descent. Still, people talk about his descent, okay? His family, his root, his forefathers who came from England. He was born in Salem, Massachusetts, which is a wealthy seaport north of Boston that specialized in East India trade. Salem is very famous in American history, and Arthur Miller, the 20th century writer, wrote a play under the title The Crucible. We will come to this later, but in this Crucible, he talks about an ordeal that hit Salem, okay, where witches were hunted and where innocent people were mistaken for witches, and they were tried and they suffered at the hands of the judges at the time. One of the judges, in fact, is one of the ancestors of Nathaniel Hawthorne, who will influence negatively Nathaniel Hawthorne's self-image or self-conception, as we will continue now, we'll discuss now. One of his ancestors had been a judge in an earlier century during trials in Salem of women accused of being witches. Okay? Hawthorne used the idea of a curse on the family of an evil judge in his novel, The House of the Seven Gables. Many of Hawthorne's stories are set in Puritan New England, and his greatest novel, The Scarlet Letter, 1850, has become the classic portrayal of Puritan America. I told you in the beginning of the class that The Scarlet Letter is very famous because it unearths, it uncovers the problems of the Puritan dogma, okay? For its time, The Scarlet Letter was a daring and even subversive book. Subversive means it challenges the controlling tenets. It challenges the common ideas about life, about death, about heaven, etc., etc. Hawthorne's gentle style, remote historical setting, and ambiguity softened his grim themes and contented the general public. But sophisticated writers such as Ralph Waldo Emerson and Herman Melville recognized the book's hellish power. Yeah, he had to strike the balance between what he aspired to or aspired for and what could be an acceptable form of writing at the time. Subtle or deep writers like Ralph Waldo Emerson, okay? Sophisticated writer means that well established in their field, okay? Erudite, knowledgeable, okay? These were aware that he was open or was firing against his society. Herman Melville, like Nathaniel Hawthorne, was a descendant of an old wealthy family that fell abruptly into poverty upon the death of the father. Abruptly, suddenly, his father's sudden death sent the family to poverty. Despite his patrician upbringing, proud family traditions, and hard work, Melville found himself in poverty with no college education. At 19, he went to the sea. The sea is surrounding America, and most of the writers, as you can see, had this connection with the sea. Mark Twain, Ernest Hemingway, we have Melville, okay? Specifically, Melville's Moby Dick is all on the seas. Moby Dick, or The Whale, Melville's masterpiece, okay? Moby Dick is Herman Melville's masterpiece. Please remember this. Is the epic story of the whaling ship Pequod and its ungodly, godlike man. You can see the oxymoron here. Ungodly, godlike man. The captain, Ahab, whose obsessive quest for the white whale, Moby Dick, leads the ship and its men to destruction. Okay, this is a ship called Pico, okay, and it is led by an over-ambitious captain, leader. His name is Ahab, and he is determined to hunt a big whale that is named Moby Dick by Herman Melville in the novel, okay? By the way, this is made in movies. It's produced in movies. You can look at the movies and have a feel of how Moby Dick is influential in American literature until this very moment in time. This work, a realistic adventure novel, contains a series of meditations on the human condition. It is not only about whaling, okay? I told you in the beginning of the class, it is about nearly everything. It's a very big book. By the way, it's translated into Arabic by Professor Ihsan Abbas, the Palestinian famous critic, okay? Whaling through the book is a grand metaphor for the pursuit of knowledge. So one main theme of Moby Dick is looking for knowledge, okay? Although Melville's novel is philosophical, it is also tragic. Despite his heroism, Ahab is doomed and perhaps damned in the end. Nature, however beautiful, remains alien. Alien means strange and potentially deadly. Yeah, there is this connection, there is this relationship between man and nature, and how nature is so harsh when man insists to subjugate it and control it, okay? In Moby Dick, Melville challenges Emerson's optimistic idea. Remember Ralph Waldo Emerson, the transcendentalist leader, okay? So Melville in Moby Dick tries to challenge Emerson's optimistic like something being able to hopeful, okay? Idea that humans can understand nature. Moby Dick, the great white whale, is an inscrutable, it cannot be understood. You cannot explore it. Cosmic existence that dominates the novel, just as he obsesses Ahab, okay? They are out for hunting the whale, but eventually the whale was also out for hunting with them, okay? Edgar Allan Poe is another American writer, but he dedicated much of his work into short stories. He is from the South, okay? And he shares with Melville a darkly metaphysical vision mixed with elements of realism, parody, and burlesque. Parody to satirize the situation, the human condition, okay? He refined the short story genre and invented detective fiction, the fiction that is interested in crime exploration, okay? Poe believed that strangeness was an essential ingredient of beauty, and his writing is often exotic, okay? What does this mean? He believed that you have to inject your writing with strange elements, okay? Because he believes that this strangeness gives the work a beautiful flavor, okay? And this is why he produced exotic writing. Exotic writing, if something is exotic, it means that it is strange or it is uneasy to understand because of a mixture of elements, because it's far from you, it's obscure, okay? It is full of mysteries, okay? You need to unlock these mysteries in order to understand it, okay? And this is the beauty of his work. His stories and poems are populated with doomed, introspective aristocrats, doomed, destined to bad luck, destined to bad destiny, okay? Poe, like many other Southerners, cherished an aristocratic ideal. Themes of death in life. What is death in life? This is a significant topic in Edgar Allan Poe's work. Death in life. How death in life can happen. This is a real problem, a real question to answer. Especially being buried alive or returning alike as a vampire from the grave appear in many of his works, including the premature burial. Okay, premature burial, the burial that happened before its time or before its due. Poe's verse here means poetry, okay? Like that of many Southerners, was very musical and strictly metrical. His best known poem in his own lifetime and today is The Raven. Raven is the biggest species of crow, okay? The biggest type of the species of crow. It was published in 1845. In his eerie poem, the haunted sleepless narrator, a narrator who doesn't sleep, okay, who has been reading and mourning the death of his lost Lenore at midnight, is visited by a raven, a bird that eats dead flesh. Now the raven eats dead flesh, dead bodies, okay? Hence a symbol of death, who perches above his door and ominously repeats the poem's famous refrain, nevermore, nevermore. The poem ends in a frozen scene of death in life. Look at the scene now. And the raven, never flitting still, is sitting on the pallid bust of Pallas just above my chamber door, and his eyes have all the seeming of a demon's that is dreaming, and the lamplight over him streaming throws his shadow on the floor. Look at throwing somebody's shadow on the floor, and my soul from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor shall be lifted nevermore. Okay? Frederick Douglass. This is the first time we come across a black writer in the American literature. Black writers are existent in the American literature, and there is this genre that is called Black American literature. And one of the most famous black writers is Toni Morrison, who won the Nobel Prize. We'll talk about her later when we come to the 20th century American literature. Frederick Douglass is the most famous black American anti-slavery leader and orator of the era, the 19th century. He was born a slave on Maryland plantation farm. It was his good fortune to be sent to relatively liberal Baltimore as a young man, where he learned to read and write. Escaping to Massachusetts in 1838, at age 21, Douglass was held by abolitionist editor. You know the word abolitionist? Abolitionism is a good term you need to learn when it comes to slavery and abolitionism of slavery. Abolitionist is the person who is against slavery, who wants to end slavery, okay? Editor William Lloyd Garrison, and began to lecture for anti-slavery societies. In 1845, he published his narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass, an American slave. Yeah, at the time, the Americans still had slaves in their farms, in their household, as servants, as slaves, and they faced all sorts of oppression. Here we have Douglass having a voice as an American, okay? The best and most popular of many slave narratives. His work is the most popular slave narrative. The slave narrative was the first black literary prose genre in the United States. It helped blacks in the difficult task of establishing an African American identity in white America, and it has continued to exert an important influence on black fictional techniques and themes throughout the 20th century. The search for identity, anger against discrimination, and sense of living an invisible, hunted, underground life unacknowledged by the white majority have recurred in the works of such 20th century black Americans such as Richard Wright, James Baldwin, Ralph Ellison, and Toni Morrison. We'll come to, we may find, if we find time, focus on James Baldwin. He is a revolutionary black American writer, and Toni Morrison, who is a great American novelist or African American novelist. For now, I will leave you, and for class 6, we are going to focus on the rise of realism. We are done with romanticism in America. After that, we are going to offer some or an overview of realism in America, and here we are going to focus on Mark Twain. We are going to focus on the ways how people started to describe life as it is. It's like with objective lenses, not as romantic writing that was derived from inner contemplation on life, death, and people. Thank you, and see you in class number 6 soon.